Over the course of 4 years, the ancient Greeks held 4 separate religious festivals that best became known for the athletic competitions they included. The oldest and most well known of these festivals was the Olympic Games, held every 4 years at Olympia in honor of the Greek god Zeus. The main events at these games included chariot racing, wrestling, boxing, and various foot races. And when the Olympic Games started some 2,800 years ago, they could have never conceived what the modern Olympic Games have become. And let's be honest, they had absolutely no idea all the different ways that the Olympic Games would be portrayed with our modern technologies of radio, television, and our reason for being here today, video games. Today, we're going to learn about the history of the Olympic Games, from its humble beginnings to its evolution into the modern Olympics. We'll then take a look at the history of video games that depict the Olympic Games as well. So join us and get ready to go for gold as we take today's trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 205th episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people that have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby video games a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we're celebrating the 2024 Paris Summer Olympics by exploring the fascinating history of both the Olympics themselves and the video games that depict the Olympic Games. We'll talk about the origin of the ancient Olympic Games, how they evolved into the modern Olympic Games, and then we'll go all the way into various adaptions of Olympic video games themselves. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who is still trying to win the gold medal in button mashing. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, have you won a gold medal in any events?
Gas passing.
Yeah, I suppose you would win a gold medal in that one.
Yeah, you just take it and you pass it. Boom. Done. Easy.
You enjoying button mashing? You good at button mashing?
You know, I don't have the speed. I'm getting whooped pretty hard. You know, I mean,
Yeah, that happens when you get older.
Well, it's not even an old thing. It's just I was never as fast. I mean, you know, we got a buddy that you get spammed with those Rocket League invites, and it's an unending thing. And them things come quick as I can't even get half the speed of that guy.
Yeah, that is very
like,
that's very true. I can't keep up with the spamming the invites. You know, one of these days we should install one of those like mouse clicking programs that like clicks the mouse hardware wise very, very fast, and just spam him that way and see how that works out. I just thought of that.
Yeah, you should.
That'd be funny.
If you want to be a cheater about it. But I'm gonna keep training to get that gold.
There are no rules in button mashing. Well, I guess you're not mashing buttons at that point, are you?
No, you are not.
But are you button mashing because he clicks a mouse? Is that button mash? No, he uses a controller, doesn't he? I stand corrected.
He uses a controller, and even if it was a mouse, it is a left mouse button.
Good point. Thank you, Olympic judge Robert Caston. I really appreciate the technicality.
Hey man, when you're competing for gold, you got to be sure you're up on the up and up.
Up on the up and up. Well, speaking of being up on the up and up, today we're going to learn all about the Olympics and Olympic video games. But before I go into that history, why don't you tell everyone what else has happened during this week in gaming history?
Kicking it off on July 31st, 1967, Tecmo was founded in Japan, originally named Tekken Limited, initially focusing on amusement machinery before shifting to video game development. Renamed Tecmo in 1986, the company gained recognition with arcade hits like Bomb Jack and Tekken World Cup. Tecmo became renowned for its influential home console titles, including the challenging Ninja Gaiden series and the fast-paced Dead or Alive fighting games, as well as the beloved Tecmo Bowl Sports series. In 2009, Tecmo merged with Koei to form Koei Tecmo Holdings, continuing to produce popular games. Tecmo's legacy remains significant in the gaming industry for its contributions to action, fighting, and sports game genres. And, we touched on Ninja Gaiden, but I don't remember the episode, so,
We
go
we
find it.
did we certainly did touch on Ninja Gaiden. It was an older episode in the
Yeah.
20s, I believe. It was one of the early history ones.
Well, you can go to our website and find it. So, yeah.
You can go there, find it.
On July 29th, 1989, Nintendo released Mother for the Famicom in Japan. Developed by Ape Inc. and directed by Shigesato Itoi, Mother is a role-playing game that deviates from traditional fantasy settings, instead placing players in a modern-day world filled with quirky characters and bizarre enemies. The game's protagonist, a young boy named Ninten, embarks on a journey to uncover the mysteries of his family's past and to thwart an alien invasion. Mother is renowned for its unique blend of humor, emotion, and unconventional gameplay elements, which include psychic powers and everyday objects as weapons. The game's innovative approach and distinctive charm garnered a dedicated fan base, leading to the creation of sequels, most notably Earthbound, known as Mother 2 in Japan. And despite its initial limited release outside Japan, Mother remains a beloved cult classic in the RPG genre.
We did an episode on that too.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
So you can learn all about Mother 2, which was the first that we got here in the US of A.
The only.
True. That is, yes, very true. Although we can now get Mother and the rest of the sequels.
Can we?
I'm sure that there are ways to get them. Of course, totally legal, quote, quote.
There are indeed ways to get them. You are correct about that.
Indeed I am, Dave. And speaking of being right, on July 30th, 1998, Namco released Soul Calibur for arcades, with a subsequent release for the Sega Dreamcast in 99. This critically acclaimed fighting game, which was a sequel to Soul Edge, set new standards in the genre with fluid combat system, stunning 3D graphics, and deep character roster. Soul Calibur introduced innovative gameplay mechanics such as the 8-way run, allowing characters to move freely in 3D space and guard impacts, enabling players to counter opponents' attacks more strategically. The Dreamcast version, in particular, was praised for its impressive graphics and smooth gameplay, which showcased the console's capabilities. Soul Calibur received widespread acclaim for its engaging single-player modes, including a compelling story mode and numerous unlockable features, making it one of the defining titles of its generation and cementing its legacy as a cornerstone of the fighting game genre. And a lot of combos use the right direction.
We also did the episode on Soul's Edge, the beginning of the series.
That we did. A lot of episodes here.
Yeah, a lot of history in the
Yes.
video game history podcast.
Who would have thought?
I know, crazy thoughts. Well, whatever.
Next up, on August 1st, 2002, Take-Two Interactive acquired Barking Dog Studios, a Vancouver-based game development company known for its work on Counter-Strike and Homeworld Cataclysm. Following the acquisition, Barking Dog Studios was rebranded as Rockstar Vancouver, becoming part of Take-Two's Rockstar Games label. This acquisition aimed to strengthen Take-Two's development capabilities and expand its portfolio of high-quality games. Rockstar Vancouver went on to develop the critically acclaimed game Bully, which showcased the studio's talent for creating immersive and innovative gaming experiences. The purchasing of Barking Dog Studios reflected Take-Two's strategic efforts to enhance its creative resources and maintain its position as a leading publisher in the video game industry. And last up for this week, On July 28, 2004, Electronic Arts, also known as EA, announced the acquisition of Criterion Games, a British video game developer known for its critically acclaimed Burnout series. Fantastic games. Criterion Games brought to EA its expertise in creating high octane racing games and the powerful renderware engine, which was used in numerous games across the industry. This acquisition allowed EA to leverage Criterion's technology and talent to enhance its portfolio of racing titles and other projects. The deal marked a significant expansion of EA's capabilities in the racing game genre, with Criterion continuing to develop successful titles under EA's banner, including further entries in the Burnout series and later contributing to the Need for Speed franchise.
That's definitely true. But the biggest acquisition there was definitely the Criterion engine because they started using that, a render rare engine rather, because they started using that in a lot of their games.
Absolutely, but I mean, come on, to be able to keep Burnout alive, so good. Except
Did
Paradise
they
did.
did they though? Because that's really all they
Yeah,
ever did with it was
Paradise.
Paradise,
Yeah,
and then they
they
let
tried.
it
They
go.
tried.
It was a novel
But hey,
concept.
it was interesting. But I mean,
Yeah, it was different, but they need to bring back a traditional Burnout game. The world wants a traditional Burnout.
well, that's just real life now, Dave.
I think that would be awesome.
I agree. It would be awesome to get another one. But people aren't here to hear about that, Dave. I think that people are here to hear about today's topic.
The Olympiad is a period of 4 years that were once defined by the Pan Hellenic Games, four separate religious festivals held in ancient Greece that became best known for the athletic competitions that they included. The Nemean Games, honoring Zeus, occurred every second year and took place in Nemea, which is now situated within Corinthia. The Pythian Games, which took place in Delphi, honored Apollo, the god of, among other things, truth, prophecy, healing, and diseases. The Isthmian Games, which were set in Isthmia and were held in honor of Poseidon, god of the sea, storms, earthquake, and horses. And perhaps the best known of the games is where the Olympiad began every 4 years with the ancient Olympic Games, held in none other than Olympia, also in honor of Zeus, the king of the gods. The Olympic Games are said to be the oldest of the Pan Hellenic Games, having started sometime around 776 BC, predating the rest of the Pan Hellenic Games by about 200 years. Now, they weren't just games, they were religious festivals too, keep that in mind. During this period, the Greeks called what was called the Olympic truce. All the city states would put down their arms and allow people and athletes to travel freely from city state to city state so that athletes and religious pilgrims could travel to each festival safely. Now, these festivals or games were often used as a political tool where the Greek city states would use the games to assert dominance over one another. Politicians would announce political alliances at the games, and during wartime, priests would offer sacrifices to the gods to ensure the victory of their own people. Now, the Greek poet Pindar wrote that the chariot race was the first event that was created as an Olympic event. There was another account written by the Greek geographer Pausanias that states that the stadion, an ancient running event, was the only event until the 14th Olympic Festival. Now, this race was a 200-yard sprint, and runners ran naked on a packed earth track. Whatever origin story you believe, whether that's Pindar or Pausanias, we know from later accounts that eventually the Olympic Games grew to have many more athletic competitions. Aside from the stadion, the running events grew to include a larger variety of running events. There was the double stadion, there was long distance running. Chariot racing, whenever it was introduced, expanded. There was 2-horse racing, there was 4-horse racing. Eventually, there was mule cart racing. We also know that there were other events like wrestling and boxing. There was an event called pankration, which was unarmed combat that would be similar to modern mixed martial arts, where they could use any discipline to take down their opponents. And then there was the ancient Olympic pentathlon, which included running, the long jump, discus throw, javelin throw, as well as wrestling. Starting with the 96th Olympiad, there was also a herald and trumpet contest, in which winners were chosen by the clarity of their enunciation and the audibility of their voice or horn blast.
So there was an Olympiad for trumpet playing.
Well, that's the thing. So we think of the Olympics nowadays as an athletic competition, but really it was a religious festival that included religion and art and an athletic competition. Now, the athletic competition is really what has stayed in the modern era, but I mean, they came together to show off their cultures to one another, and pay homage to the gods.
Think that'd be a hell of a lot cooler than just sports.
Well, I mean, and
Blast that
essentially,
trumpet, baby.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It was really only men that participated in most events. Women were allowed to participate in the chariot racing, and there was a woman. I don't know if she played herald or if she was a herald or she was a trumpeter, but there was a woman that had won these events too. So it wasn't just men, though. Most of the physical events, the wrestling and the running, and that was limited to men. Also, it was mostly limited to Greek city states, Greek citizens, so to speak. There really weren't international. There weren't really outsiders allowed. That's up in the air. I mean, for every thing that we know about the Olympics, there's a little tidbit here and there that may contradict it. But that's true for most history during that period when we only really have accounts from Olympic poets like Pindar and geographers and stuff to go off of, and you never know when you depend on the words of man. You never know.
Yeah.
The last recorded ancient Olympiad, the 293rd, was held in 393 AD, but there are archaeological findings that suggest that the games were still held afterwards. Although the ancient festival to the gods concept of the Olympiad was gone, the use of the term Olympic to describe athletic events was still seen as the world progressed into the modern age. So between 1612 and 1664, there was a competition called the Cotswold Olympic Games in England, which had events such as horse racing, jumping, shin kicking,
Oh, that's great.
and wrestling. Yeah, exactly. I had to add shin kicking when I saw that was in there. I was like, yeah, buddy, that's the way to do it. There was an annual festival called l'Olympiade de la République in revolutionary France from 1796 to 1798. De la République. I got that butchered a little bit. That's okay. In 1834 and 1836, there were Olympic Games held in Sweden. Between 1862 and 1867, Liverpool had an annual Grand Olympic Festival. So there was always this sense into the modern age that Olympic was associated with athleticism, right? Because these are all athletic competitions. So that concept never really went away. The Greeks themselves began to see an increased interest in reviving their own Olympic Games, right? Because it originated with them after they won the Greek War of Independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1821. People began to petition their leader at the time. There was one man, he was a wealthy Greek Romanian philanthropist named Evangelos Zappos. He offered to fund a permanent revival of the Olympic Games in 1856. He actually funded the rebuilding of the Pan Athletic arena that's there, a marble arena that they used to host games in once upon a time. His idea became a reality in 1859 when they held Olympic Games in an Athens city square. So he got his wish eventually. In 1850, Olympian classes, called the Meeting of the Olympian Class, were held in England. These actually still exist today as what are called the Wenlock Olympian Games. Now, the organizer of the Wenlock Olympian Games was a man named William Penny Brooks. And as the Greeks began to revive their idea of the Olympics, William Penny Brooks wrote to them and pushed for international competition between their own version of the Olympic Games. Unfortunately, his idea never came to fruition before his death in 1895. But there was another man, Pierre de Coubertin, who had a similar idea back in 1889, and he spent the next 5 years organizing an international meeting to make it happen. Coubertin wrote an appeal to sports enthusiasts in a newspaper, and Brooks replied to him. And so that started a correspondence between the two that would continue until Brooks' death. Coubertin built upon the notions that Brooks and Zappas started with their athletic competitions, and he pushed for a international meeting to make it happen, right? He wanted to form what's called an Olympic Congress, and he was successful. The Olympic Congress first met in 1894, and it was this Olympic Congress that got together and put together rules for a game, and they formed themselves into the International Olympic Committee and worked to plan a few years later the 1896 Summer Olympics in Athens, Greece, which was the first of the International Olympic Games, the first of the modern Olympic Games. So we had come a long, long way. As I noted on the top, Rob, I don't know if you know this. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the Olympiad, the term, is a period of 4 years. The Greeks actually used Olympiad as a reference point. It was a calendar epoch. For instance, in one of the historical records of the founding of Rome, it actually states Romulus, the first ruler of the city, began his reign in the first year of the 7th Olympiad. There's another Greek record that notes that the birth of Jesus Christ was on year 3 of the Olympiad 194. So they actually used the Olympiads as a way to bring their calendar together, their history together. They would frequently reference this happened during the 190th Olympiad in which so and so won the stadion. So like that was a major event that they all used as a like a landmark, to get their bearings time wise, so to speak.
So instead of just saying adding, multiplying it by 4 years, they just said an Olympiad and shortened everything by 4.
Well, they didn't really have that. The idea of the modern calendar wasn't a thing. So before there was the idea of the modern calendar, that was what they used. That was one of the things they used. There were others, but Olympiads were something that they literally addressed time around, which is really fascinating. So the point of that is, in modern times, the Summer Olympics are the games of the Olympiad. And in terms of numbering, we use the term Olympiad in the exact same way. So the Summer Olympics in Paris, France, that are currently taking place are the games of the 33rd Olympiad. The games that would have been during World War II, the 12th and 13th Olympiad, were canceled. We don't count Olympics or Olympiads by games. We actually count them by years, starting with the first one in 1896, following the ancient tradition that the Greeks did. I don't know if you knew that. I think a lot of people hear these are the games of the 33rd Olympiad and assume this is the 33rd Olympic Games. That's not the case.
Sure it is.
It is, huh?
Yep.
Well, there you go. If you didn't know that, now you do. Every 4 years, an Olympiad passes, and if we're lucky, one city across the globe hosts athletic games that bring people together from all across the globe. Rob, do you know what else can bring people together from all across the world?
What's that, Dave?
Podcasting. Whether you're an expert or just starting out, our friends at Zencaster make it easy to create your own podcast. With their all in one podcasting suite, you can record, edit, and publish high quality podcasts effortlessly.
With Zencaster, you can record up to 4K video with your guests and have peace of mind with their multi-layered backups. You'll always have the highest quality recordings, even if your connection is unstable.
And with their post production tools, you'll always sound like a pro. Zencaster automatically removes background noises, adjusts loudness, and even takes care of all those awkward pauses with just a single click of a button.
If you're thinking about starting a podcast or want to take your current podcast to the next level, go to zencaster.com/pricing and use the code MemoryCardLane to get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan.
Sign up for Zencaster today and share your ideas with the world. Well, the Olympic Committee had shared its idea of the modern Olympics with the world at 1896 in Athens, and then it started the modern Olympics. But it was quite some time before technology would get us to where we are today. Of course, video games didn't start until the 1970s. And so it wasn't until 1980 that the world got its very first video game depicting the modern Olympics. Hey, side note, I don't know if there's a game that depicts the ancient Olympics. Wouldn't that be kind of cool?
Like throwing heads through a hoop on a wall.
No, 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 no. I just think. I mean, there's probably a caveman game somewhere that someone could argue is kind of like the ancient Olympics, but I don't think so, anyone's ever like. We've got all these athletic games for modern times, but I don't think anyone's ever done a historical athletic game. We need more of that, right? Like historical sport games, like basketball when the net was still an apple. An apple. The thing. What was the first one
Basket,
where they apple basket? They cut the bottom of it.
bushel.
Isn't that how basketball started?
That might just be a media portrayal from a show we watched, but sure, I don't know. I don't know the
But
history of basketball. That's another episode.
but we need more historical depictions of things. I guess when it comes to games, modern depictions are historical depictions. It's not like you can do a historical depiction of chess. The game of chess hasn't changed in hundreds of years.
Wow,
So
we did do an episode on that, so you can find out just how wrong you are.
true enough. But there should really be a game that depicts some of this stuff in the ancient era. It's not like the Olympics were the first athletic competitions. I mean, we know on the for instance, there are depictions on the tombs in Egypt on the pyramids that show athletic competitions. So even before the Greeks, we know that men have been hosting not Olympic but athletic competitions.
No, it would be interesting to see a game like that. I don't know how well it would do, but I think it'd be cool to see at least.
I mean, there's obscure games. There's all sorts of obscure games out there that are really like zeroed in for specific nerd groups. I'm sure someone might want to do something fun like that. I mean, they
Well, that's
still
what
make
I'm saying. It would be
yeah,
popular to some people, but I don't think it would be the next Call of Duty.
true enough. That's so true. I don't expect that. I don't expect any sport game but Madden to ever hold that torch, and even that's starting to slip. Again, the world got its very first video game depicting the modern Olympics in 1980. Olympic Decathlon was written by Timothy W. Smith for the TRS-80, and it was published by Microsoft, who also helped bring it to the Apple II. It was also ported to the IBM PC in 1982, and they renamed it Microsoft Decathlon. Now, there were 10 events in the very first video game Olympiad: the 100-meter run, the long jump, the shot put, the 400-meter run, the 100-meter hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, and a 1,500-meter run. Sounds like a lot of button mashing.
It does.
Now, how the original games used to do running was pretty much just button mashing.
I don't remember because the only one I remember was the run in the track and field pad.
That was my next question. Did you remember any Olympic games? And you definitely remember one.
Well, it's not the only one I remember, but that's the first one I remember. Because I remember trying to use that stupid pad, and I'm pretty sure ours never worked because I could never get it to work.
Oh, it never worked for
So,
anybody.
okay, that makes me feel a little better. I thought it was just broken.
No,
I
no,
mean, I
it
guess it
never
was
worked for
broken.
anyone. It was poor. It was poor. Poor. It wasn't very responsive to be like brand new. It just that wasn't its thing.
It wasn't like the
So
DDR pads of the future.
no, God no, 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 no. Not only is Olympic Decathlon the very first gaming depiction of any Olympic event, but it's also one of the first sport related games to mix game and simulation elements. Up until that point, most of the games were very arcadey. This is still early on in video game history. We still don't have a lot of sport games to begin with, and like I said, this is one of the first ones that tried to be more like a simulation and less like an arcade. So the following year, Activision had to jump on that bandwagon by releasing the Activision Decathlon. It featured pretty much the exact same events as the Microsoft Decathlon. The Activision Decathlon was made for the Atari 2600 in August of 1983. About a month later, in September of 1983, at the Tokyo Amusement Machine Show, Konami unveiled the first licensed Olympic video game. Hyper Olympic was an arcade cabinet that featured 6 events: the 100-meter dash, the long jump, the javelin throw, the 110-meter hurdles, the hammer throw, and the high jump. Now, its Japanese release was licensed as the game of the 1984 Summer Olympics. However, when it was released in Europe and North America, it was no longer called Hyper Olympics. It was called Track and Field, and it did not have the Olympics license. That's a little bit of a stretch. So, Europe actually got it as a Hyper Olympic release. And then when they released it in North America, they re released it in Europe as Track and Field instead of Hyper Olympics. So Japan had a licensed Hyper Olympics, Europe had a unlicensed Hyper Olympics, and then Europe and United States later got Track and Field instead of Hyper Olympics. Same game, just different name.
Was it oh, you said it wasn't licensed though.
No, no, no. They only had the license attached to the original Japanese release. So for whatever reason, the subsequent versions and ports, none of them were licensed, officially licensed. So Track and Field ended up being one of the most successful arcade cabinets in 1984. It was in its first couple months like the highest grossing cabinet here. For the entirety of 1984, it was the third highest grossing cabinet in the United States. So it did okay. People were interested to go to the arcades and play a sport game. Konami and Centauri, who published the arcade, Centauri was the publisher of the arcade cabinet in North America. They actually held an international video game competition around Track and Field. It was a competition that drew more than 1 million players across the globe in 1984. And that actually held the record for the largest organized video game competition until there's some argument on this, but it held it till at least 2016.
Why is there argument?
So in 2017, FIFA had like a competition, an online competition, where you could, they started doing esports and you could qualify online. And so technically, FIFA had a competition that had 8 million people in it or something through this. But there's a definition between online organized competition and like they didn't have that. This was in person. Not that they were all in the same place, but like there's just some argument between the two. Like, are the same? Are they different categories? Does the FIFA competition count because of the nature of it? Things like that. But we do know at the very least that until at least 2016, nothing came even close to being a million people all competing for the same thing at once across the globe, which is which is impressive, honestly. 32 years roughly,
Yeah,
um,
that is insane.
to hold that record. And now, of course, if we're looking at it, because I kind of agree, when you start looking at it from the modern standpoint with the FIFA competition and then subsequent competitions, there are definitely million person plus video game competitions nowadays. I mean, that's all online gaming is realistically. Track and Field was incredibly popular. It was eventually ported over to Atari consoles, the Atari PCs, the Commodore 64, the Apple II. It eventually made its way to the Famicom and the Nintendo Entertainment System as well. The popularity of track and field actually began a resurgence of sorts in the industry for sports games. It was not a popular genre, but because track and field was so popular, other companies started to make games, sport games specifically, to jump on that bandwagon, after it came out in 1984. Games that kind of followed suit that we have to thank include like Punch Out was during this period, versus tennis and versus baseball by Nintendo. 10-Yard Fight came out in this period. Birdie King 2, which was a golf game, and tag team wrestling. So there were plenty of games that try to capitalize on this sports craze started by track and field. And it also, of course, spawned plenty of other Olympic themed video games. The following year, actually the same year, in 1984, Ocean Software published Daley Thompson's Decathlon. Daley Thompson was made famous by winning gold in the decathlon at the 1980 and 1983 for Olympic Games. It's very similar to Konami's track and field, though. It sold very well, Daley Thompson's Decathlon. It was actually the ninth best-selling computer game in the United Kingdom for the entirety of 1985. So the following year, Ocean made Daley Thompson's Super Test, and to coincide with the 1988 Olympic Games, they made Daley Thompson's Olympic Challenge. 1984 also saw a sequel to Konami's Hyper Olympics called Hyper Sports. It added 7 new events. Now you could go swimming, you could participate in skeet shooting, there was long horse, there was archery, there was the triple jump, there was weightlifting, and now you could also pole vault. So people were trying to bring people back to play the new games by including more events. Epix jumped in on the action in 1984 with the Summer Games. In 1985, they came out with the Winter Games, because it was not licensed. It was not the Olympic Games. It was called the Epix Games, which I like because that sounds awesome.
Nice. That is awesome. It's epic.
It's exactly. See, you get it. You get it. They should all be the Epic Games. And now back to what we were just talking about. My introduction to this genre, probably your introduction to this genre, was courtesy of a little game called Stadium Events that was developed by Human Entertainment and published by Bandai in 1986. It was better known here in the United States as World Class Track Meet. Nintendo renamed it when they re-released it alongside the Power Pad that you were referencing in 1987. So, fun little fact, if you don't know this, they did actually release some copy of Stadium Events in the United States before they decided to rebrand it. The minimum run of a cartridge is 10,000, so there's this belief that there's 10,000 copies out there, but we think that the number is even smaller because we haven't found very many. Because that number is so small, it is one of the rarest NES games on the collector's market. In 2016, a copy sold for $35,000.
Damn.
And no doubt with the inflation of the market after COVID, it has probably doubled or tripled or something like that at this point. But if you ever secondhand, thrift store, garage sale, anything, find a copy of Stadium Events, you buy it no matter what it costs, assuming someone doesn't know it's $35,000. So the world didn't end up on seeing another licensed Olympic title until Olympic Gold was released for the Sega Mega Drive and the Sega Genesis in May of 1992. Olympic Gold was the official video game of the games of the 25th Olympiad hosted by Barcelona. The European version, for reasons I couldn't find, was also sponsored by Coca-Cola.
Nice. That's fantastic. Because why not, Dave?
Well, exactly. Why not? In Olympic Gold, you could participate in the 100-meter dash, the hammer throw, archery, 110-meter hurdles, pole vault, 200-meter freestyle swimming, and 3-meter springboard diving. You could also play as one of 8 playable countries, including France, Great Britain, Germany, Italy, Japan, Spain, United States, and the unified team. If you don't know what the unified team is, it was for the Barcelona Olympics, a group of former Soviet countries that came together to compete in the Olympics after the fall of the USSR. And from there has been a licensed game for almost each subsequent Olympiad. The official video game of the 1996 Atlanta Summer Olympics was called Olympic Summer Games. It was released for the SNES, Game Boy, PlayStation, Sega Genesis, and 3DO. It added the high jump, long jump, and skeet shooting to the list of events previously found in Olympic Gold. The official games of the 27th Olympiad, which were hosted by Sydney, was literally called Sydney 2000. It was released for the PlayStation, Windows, and Dreamcast. It featured a few new events, including super heavyweight weightlifting, platform diving, chase cycling, and kayak K1 slalom. I said that the Barcelona. No, I did that right. Never mind. Barcelona was 25, Atlanta was 26, Sydney was 27. I thought I got the numbering wrong, but I did not get the numbering wrong. Athens 2004 was the official video game of the 28th Olympiad. It was released for PlayStation 2 and Windows. In it, we have the addition of some more gymnastic and some equestrian events, and now we're up to 64 playable countries, bringing the world together. Beijing 2008 was released for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Windows. It was published by Sega. This one has 38 events in total. Wow.
Wow, that's a lot.
On top of expanding the amount of track and field, aquatic, and gymnastic events, it also included judo and table tennis. This one also has an online multiplayer mode, which was the first seen in any Olympic video game, so you could literally compete with people around the globe, which is kind of neat if you think about it.
Yeah.
The 2012 Summer Olympics in London received an official game in the form of London 2012, released for Windows, PS3, Xbox 360, and there was also an iOS version. Seen for the first time are synchronized springboard diving, which could only be played in a local multiplayer mode. In fact, this is the first Olympic game that has local cooperative events, period. So it had couch multiplayer, and for some events that took two people, you could sit on your couch and play them together. That was the only way to play those events, actually. Which is, I mean, that's cool.
Like bobsledding and stuff like that.
That's a great question. I don't know what the other events are other than the synchronized one. I should have looked that up, but I did not. I can tell you that for the first time, that Olympic game added men's trampoline, women's beach volleyball, some cycling events, and a rowing event. So, there were definitely some events added. Rowing, I can see being two people.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, the 2016 Rio Olympics are surprisingly without an official licensed video game. That doesn't mean a game doesn't exist. We'll come back to that in a moment. The official video game of the 2020 Olympics was Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, the official video game. That is a mouthful. It was released for the PS4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and Windows. It was developed and published by Sega. That game was originally released on July 24th, 2019 in Japan, but because of the COVID pandemic delaying the actual games, it wasn't released outside of Japan until June of 2021. And now, before we look at the Paris Olympics, let's go back for a moment. So, in the early 2000s, Sega was transitioning from hardware development to software development when they decided to not produce consoles anymore, right? So, they went from being the hardware developer to being a third party developer. And during this period, they had partnered up with Nintendo to help develop an arcade cabinet for F-Zero GX. And through that project, the two developed a working relationship. As part of this relationship, they casually discussed bringing their characters together in a crossover game, right? Sega Sonic the Hedgehog
Create the best one.
and Nintendo's Mario. But at the time, they really couldn't figure out a setting that would make sense. So it was tabled, really. And then shortly thereafter, Sega was awarded the Olympic license for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. They made the official Beijing video game. In order to earn the license, they kind of had to adopt the mission of the International Olympic Committee, which was to promote a sporting spirit, with the notion of promoting that concept to young people, right? If you're going to make an Olympic game, you have to show good sportsmanship and show the youth this idea of good sporting. And so Sega thought themselves that the Olympics might provide a great setting for the rivals to come together. And so they presented this vision to Nintendo, the concept of Mario versus Sonic, and the notion of, appealing good sportsmanship and everything to the youth. And Nintendo, being Nintendo, was on board with the idea. They loved it. And what came from this partnership, this license, everything, was the first in the Mario and Sonic series, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. So coincidentally, that game was released before Beijing 2008. So technically, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games was the first licensed game of the 2008 Olympics, with Beijing 2008 being the second licensed game of the 2008 Olympics. And that began a series of games. We were treated to Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games. And while there was not an official video game of the 2016 Rio Games, we did get Mario and Sonic at the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. So technically there was a licensed Olympic title. There just wasn't a pure simulation one. We also got Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, and that catches us back up here to Paris 2024. There is a mobile game called Olympics Go Paris 2024, but beyond that, there are no planned console games that feature this year's Olympic Games, which is kind of disappointing because Paris is a really iconic city, and some of the venues for the Olympics, if you have been watching them, are like epic. But there is no planned console release for this year, and they haven't skipped an Olympic Games since literally the second one in this story, the 1988 Seoul Olympics. So for the first time, really, since they skipped 1988, there isn't a video game to accompany an Olympic Games. That's what, almost 40 years of straight Olympic Games that they're breaking the trend this year.
Maybe they're
So
still developing it?
nope,
No.
they are not. They, no announcement, no nothing like that. They're just not doing a console version. There's various theories. I read an article I can get behind the other day that suggests the economy has a lot to do with it because, game sales in general are down. So when you have such a niche genre, like, it's just not worth it at this point when people aren't buying to begin with, So there are reasons. There are reasons.
All right, fair enough.
There have been, in case you don't know, other unlicensed game in around the Olympics. In 1992, Capcom released the Gold Medal Challenge. Kind of related, in 1994, there was a game released for the Game Boy called the Alien Olympics 2044 AD. Whether or not that becomes an official title or not remains to be seen. We still got 20 years. Konami brought back track and field as international track and field in 1996, 2000, and 2008. There was a game for the Xbox 360 called Summer Athletics that was released in 2008 as well. And if you'll remember, Google celebrated the 2020 Olympics with a series of doodle games on their search engine called the Doodle Champion Island Games.
That sounds fantastic.
And so far, we've been focused on the summer games, but I do want to point out that there have been official games to match up with the Winter Olympics, starting with the 1994 Winter Olympics in Lillehammer. Nagano got them in 1998, Salt Lake in 2002, Torino in 2006, and Vancouver in 2010.
And don't forget in 2014, Mario and Sonic.
Yes, they did. Mario and Sonic picked up the helm in 2014 with the Sochi 2014 Olympic Winter Games. There was nothing made, though, for the 2018 Winter Olympics held in Pyeongchang, South Korea. all these winter games include all the fun things at the Winter Olympics, like skiing, sledding, snowboarding, ski jumping, and speed skating. And before I move on, there's one more thing I want to talk about that's in the future. I do want to take a moment and talk about one more licensed Olympic game. In 1995, a studio named Alexandria developed a game for the Sega Genesis and later the Super Nintendo called Izzy's Quest for the Olympic Rings. Izzy's Quest is a platformer in which players control Izzy, the mascot of the Atlanta 1996 Summer Games, as he sets out to recover what else but the Olympic rings. So someone did try to do something different with an Olympic license in the mid 90s. They didn't do much with it. It wasn't very good. It wasn't very popular.
Seems to be the case.
And in order to wrap it, not in order to, but let's wrap it up by talking about the future, because the timing couldn't be any better for this episode. Because just last week, the International Olympic Committee voted to include esports.
Damn.
Isn't that cool?
I had no idea. I knew about breakdancing, but
Yes,
I did not
breakdancing.
hear.
Breakdancing is brand new to this year. Breakdancing, we got breakdancing for the first time. But yes, the week before last week, the IOC voted yay. It's an Olympic level esports event. It's not going to be the Summer Olympics or the Winter Olympics. There's going to be an Olympic level esports event. It will be its own thing. So just to be clear, they're not adding it to the Summer Olympics. There's now an Olympics esport, just Olympics esports, which is kind of cool, right? Because it's another level, right? Because you've always had professional and you've had your Olympic athletes, and now we have that in gaming too.
True that. That's pretty awesome. Big W for the gaming community.
So there's going to be the creation of the Olympic esport games. We get them next year. The first edition is going to be held in 2025 in Saudi Arabia, and I don't know anything else about it at the moment. The fact that it was talked about and voted and everything is a good start, right?
Indeed, it is.
So there you go. That is the history and the future of the Olympics and Olympic video games, technically. Right?
Yeah.
Because now other games are going to be Olympic video games, not just Olympic video games.
Well, Dave, you might as well just say it's the history of Olympic Games.
It is the history of Olympic games. That is very true. But we've come a long way from Athens in 776 BCE. A long, long way. You know, they could have never imagined that the games would become such a big, elaborate international event. That would blow anyone's mind. The kind of globalization that has occurred. I think any ancient person would have their mind blown by how connected the world is nowadays.
Well, they'd be mind blown at how big the world is.
Very, very true. That is absolutely true. A lot of good things. There have been a lot of really great things we've talked about. A lot of great gaming history. Of course, there were other games that were attached to This Week in Gaming History. We talked about Ninja Gaiden. We talked about the Renderware engine. What else did we talk about in the gaming history? Just a whole bunch of fun stuff. Of course, that can all be found on our old episodes, which, of course, you can find by going to our website, which is www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people find on our website?
You can find a calendar of our future episodes, get a look at what we are going to be talking about in the upcoming weeks. You can find a link to our Discord where you can come talk to Dave and I and just spit little facts that you might know about little random things. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us, get access to ad-free and unedited versions of our episodes. And you can find links to our social medias where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is Wrong. Each week, we tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. This week, in celebration of the Paris Olympics, we talked about the history of the Olympics themselves and the history of Olympic video games, leading into the recent announcement that there's going to be an Olympics esport games. So, yay! One of the greatest parts about doing this podcast week in, week out is when we sit down to research new episodes. The goal is literally, what don't we know, right? If I don't know it, I'm assuming a lot of people don't know it. So I'm going to take the things that I don't know and I'm going to teach other people. So in this fantastic cycle of teaching and learning and teaching, we like to go around table, round table, round table, and talk about our takeaways each week. So Rob, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned all about the old Olympics. Obviously, the Olympiad being every 4 years, didn't know that was a thing. But I think the coolest thing to me, and something that's really sad that it's not the case anymore, is that it was a celebration of art as much as it was sports, as sports are a form of art, and that we don't get to just hear people blasting their trumpets in the Olympics anymore. I think
No.
that'd be all. I think it'd be cool, man. Like
I,
honestly, like we have solo ensemble for musicians and things, but it's not as popular. And I think that'd be a really cool thing to say, hey, I got to play my saxophone in the Olympics. I was
wait,
an Olympic
wait,
performer.
wait, though. We did just have our first ever metal performance, performance by a metal band in the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics. So we're moving in the right direction.
You are right. We are definitely getting back to the old ways. And pretty soon we'll start playing basketball with the heads of our enemies.
Maybe we'll see. I hope not. That'd be, I don't know.
So that's my big takeaway, Dave. How about thyself?
I had never studied the ancient Olympic Games very much, so that was a fun rabbit hole to go down. Learning about the Pan Hellenic Games in their entirety because there was four of them. I never really learned much about that, so learning about all the different games and that kind of gets you down a rabbit hole of not just the athletic games, but what the games were in terms of like the city states vying for political, you know, clout, so to speak, and so on and so forth. One of the other interesting things about the Olympic Games, the ancient Olympic Games, they weren't awarded prizes. There were a lot of athletic competitions and stuff that they were awarded, wealth or favors or things like that. But all they won for the Olympic Games was a wreath. So they were called the Stephanitic Games as well, because that's the abbreviation. Stephanitic is Stephanite or Stephanic or something like that's a wreath. Yes. Also, I was reminded that the word gymnasium literally means is a translation of naked training, and that tickles my funny bone too. I didn't put that in the episode, but I was reminded of that while researching this one.
All right, good to know. Did not know that either.
So, all right, Rob. Well, before I look ahead to next week, is there anything that you'd like to add to today's episode?
After naked training, Dave, I don't think there is.
Fair enough. I think we should end it there then. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, as always, take a quick moment to say thank you so much to all of our listeners. We hope that you enjoy listening and that we get the gold medal in your podcast listening experience.
Ooh, good one. All right, fellow sport gamers. That wraps up our gold medal journey through the history of the Olympic Games and its depiction in video games. Next week, though, we're shifting gears from the athletic arenas to the eerie corridors of a haunted pizzeria. We'll be diving into the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, exploring the origins of the spine chilling franchise, its impact on horror gaming, and kind of diving into the terrifying lore that has captured the imaginations of players worldwide. So, if you've enjoyed the competitive spirit of the Olympics, get ready next week for a different kind of thrill. Join us as we navigate the jump scares and mysterious animatronics, unraveling the secrets of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria on next week's trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Doo-boo-doo-bop-bop-dop-dop-dop-doo-ah.